Hey everyone, and welcome to Economic Alchemy. I'm your host, and today we're diving deep into the heart of major economic crises that have shaped the world we live in. Get ready for a wild ride through history as we uncover the events that shook nations, shattered fortunes, and believe it or not, paved the way for incredible innovation. From the tulip fields of 17th century Holland to the interconnected global markets of the 21st century, we'll journey through time to understand how these crises unfolded. We'll uncover the factors that led to each economic earthquake, the key players who rode the waves of change, and the lasting impact these events have had on our world. Economic crises, as devastating as they can be, often serve as crucibles of change. Think of it like a forest fire, destructive in the short term, but ultimately clearing the way for new growth. The 2008 financial crisis prompted new regulations to prevent another global meltdown. In this series, we'll be examining these crises through a capitalist lens. What does that mean exactly? Well, we'll be focusing on how markets reacted to these periods of extreme stress and volatility. We'll analyze how the forces of supply and demand played out, how prices were impacted, and how businesses and individuals adapted to survive. We'll also delve into the role of key figures in each crisis, the visionaries, the risk-takers, and sometimes even the villains. From John Law's ill-fated Mississippi Company to Alan Greenspan's controversial reign at the Federal Reserve, we'll uncover the human stories behind these economic upheavals. Our first stop takes us back to the Dutch Golden Age, a period of flourishing trade, art, and culture in the Netherlands. Amidst this prosperity, a peculiar phenomenon took root: tulip mania. Imagine a world where a single flower, prized for its vibrant colors and exotic allure, could fetch a price equivalent to a grand estate. That was the reality of 17th century Holland. Initially, tulips were a luxury item enjoyed by the wealthy, who adorned their gardens and homes with these prized blooms. However, as the flower's popularity soared, so too did its price, transforming the tulip market into a speculative bubble.
As the tulip market heated up, a speculative frenzy gripped the nation. People were mortgaging their homes, selling their possessions, and borrowing heavily to invest in tulip bulbs.
Contracts for future tulip deliveries were traded with reckless abandon, driving prices to dizzying heights.
At the peak, a single Semper Augustus tulip bulb sold for more than a Grand Canal house in Amsterdam. Like all bubbles, the tulip mania couldn't last forever. In early 1637, the market began to tremble. Some savvy investors, sensing that the frenzy had reached its peak, started selling their tulip contracts, triggering a domino effect.
As prices began to fall, panic set in. Those who had borrowed heavily to invest in tulips found themselves facing financial ruin. The once coveted tulip, a symbol of wealth and status, became a stark reminder of the perils of speculation and the fragility of market bubbles. As tulip mania faded in the Netherlands, a new speculative frenzy engulfed Europe, centered on riches from distant lands. The South Sea Company, established in 1711, promised wealth from South American trade. Investors poured their savings, driving stock prices to astronomical levels.
Meanwhile, across the English Channel, France was in the throes of its own speculative bubble, orchestrated by the enigmatic Scottish economist and financier John Law.
Law, a proponent of paper money, had convinced the French regent Philippe II, Duke of Orléans, that he could revitalize France's stagnant economy through a series of ambitious financial reforms.
At the heart of Law's plan was the Mississippi Company, granted a monopoly over trade with the vast and supposedly gold-rich Louisiana Territory in North America. Law's Mississippi Company, much like its English counterpart, became a vehicle for rampant speculation. The company's shares, fueled by rumors of Louisiana's riches and Law's own charisma, skyrocketed in value. The year 1720 marked the bursting point for both the South Sea and Mississippi bubbles.
As with all speculative bubbles, the soaring stock prices were unsustainable. built on a foundation of hype, speculation, and the dangerous belief that the laws of economics had been suspended. In England, rumors of the South Sea Company's exaggerated claims of wealth in South America began to circulate, triggering a sell-off that quickly spiraled into a panic. The stock price of the South Sea Company plummeted, wiping out the fortunes of countless investors, including many members of the aristocracy. The collapse sent shockwaves through the English economy, leading to widespread bankruptcies and a loss of confidence in the financial system. Fast forward to the 1920s, a decade of unprecedented economic prosperity and social change, particularly in the United States. The Roaring Twenties, as they came to be known, witnessed a surge in industrial production, technological innovation, and consumer spending. Automobiles, radios, and telephones became commonplace, transforming the lives of millions. However, beneath this veneer of prosperity, cracks were beginning to appear in the economic foundation. The stage was set for a dramatic fall.
Section 2. Black Tuesday. The crash that reverberated around the world. October 29, 1929. A date etched in economic history. On this fateful day, known as Black Tuesday, the American stock market experienced a catastrophic collapse. Years of speculative excess and overvaluation came crashing down as panic selling gripped investors. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, a key indicator of the stock market's health, plummeted by almost 13% on that single day, wiping out billions of dollars in paper wealth. The collapse of the stock market triggered a chain reaction, leading to bank failures, business closures, and widespread unemployment. Section 3. Laissez-faire versus interventionism. A battle of economic ideologies. The Great Depression sparked a fierce debate about the role of government in the economy. On one side were proponents of laissez-faire economics, who believed that the market, left to its own devices, would eventually self-correct. President Herbert Hoover, a staunch believer in limited government intervention, initially adopted this approach, urging patience and self-reliance as the nation grappled with the crisis. However, as the Depression deepened and unemployment soared, Hoover's policies faced growing criticism.
Section 4. The New Deal, a turning point in American capitalism. In 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt assumed the presidency, promising a New Deal. Roosevelt's New Deal marked a significant departure from laissez-faire policies. It aimed at providing relief, recovery, and reform. Programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps put millions to work on conservation projects. The Social Security Act established a safety net for the elderly. The New Deal reshaped the role of government in American life. It provided crucial relief and laid the foundation for a stable economy. Our journey through economic history takes us to the 1970s, a decade marked by political upheaval and social change. In October 1973, a coalition of Arab states led by Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack on Israel, igniting the Yom Kippur War. The United States, a staunch ally of Israel, provided military aid, angering OPEC. OPEC used oil as a weapon of economic warfare. The impact of the OPEC oil embargo was immediate and profound. Oil prices, which had been relatively stable for decades, quadrupled virtually overnight. The sudden surge in oil prices sent shockwaves through the global economy, triggering a recession in many Western nations. Long lines at gas stations became a common sight as motorists grappled with fuel shortages and soaring prices. The energy crisis of the 1970s exposed the vulnerability of industrialized nations that had become heavily reliant on cheap and abundant oil to fuel their economies. As the oil crisis deepened, its impact on the global economy became severe. Diplomatic efforts intensified to find a resolution. Henry Kissinger, then U.S. Secretary of State, played a pivotal role in Middle East diplomacy.
My shuttle diplomacy aimed to broker peace and ease the oil embargo. Kissinger's efforts eventually yielded results. He helped broker a ceasefire between Israel and Egypt. This paved the way for lifting the oil embargo.
Our next stop takes us to Latin America in the 1970s, a region brimming with economic potential but also grappling with political instability and social inequality. The 1970s witnessed a surge in lending to developing countries, fueled in part by the petrodollars, surplus revenues amassed by oil-producing nations during the oil crises of the decade. Latin American countries eager to finance development projects and boost economic growth became major recipients of these petrodollar loans. These loans, while seemingly a boon at the time, carried hidden risks. Many Latin American governments, often ruled by authoritarian regimes, borrowed heavily to finance ambitious infrastructure projects, expand social programs, and, in some cases, enrich corrupt officials. In the early 1980s, external factors created a perfect storm for Latin American economies. Paul Volcker, appointed chairman of the Federal Reserve in 1979, aimed to tame runaway inflation.
Volcker's strategy involved raising interest rates sharply, impacting heavily indebted developing countries.
As U.S. interest rates soared, the cost of servicing Latin America's debt skyrocketed. The global economy slipped into recession, leading to a decline in demand for commodities such as oil, copper, and coffee. Falling commodity prices reduced export earnings, making it difficult to meet debt obligations. The Latin American debt crisis of the 1980s, often referred to as the lost decade, had a devastating impact on the region. As countries struggled to make debt payments, they turned to the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, for assistance.
The IMF imposed strict austerity measures as a condition for providing loans.
These measures often exacerbated social inequalities and sparked widespread protests. The debt crisis plunged many Latin American countries into a cycle of recession and social upheaval. Our final stop takes us to the heart of the 21st century, to the events that led to the global financial crisis of 2008, a crisis that exposed the interconnectedness of the global financial system. The seeds of this crisis were sown in the years leading up to 2008, during a period of boundless optimism and easy credit, particularly in the United States. The housing market experienced a prolonged boom, with house prices soaring to unprecedented levels. This boom, fueled by low interest rates and lax lending standards, led to a surge in mortgage lending, including to subprime borrowers. These subprime mortgages, packaged as mortgage-backed securities, were widely held by financial institutions around the world, spreading the risk far and wide. The subprime mortgage market seemed lucrative for lenders, investors, and borrowers as long as house prices rose. However, this house of cards was built on a shaky foundation. By 2007, house prices were in free fall. Many subprime borrowers found themselves underwater. Defaults and foreclosures skyrocketed. The collapse triggered a global financial crisis. Major banks like Lehman Brothers faced massive losses. The global financial crisis of 2008 was a watershed moment, exposing the fragility of the global financial system. Governments took unprecedented actions to prevent a complete meltdown. In the U.S., Congress passed TARP, injecting billions into struggling banks. The Federal Reserve slashed interest rates and implemented quantitative easing. These interventions are credited with preventing a complete collapse. However, the crisis led to a deep recession and soaring unemployment. Section 4. Lessons learned. The importance of regulation and risk management. The global financial crisis of 2008 was a stark reminder of the importance of financial regulation and risk management. Governments worldwide implemented new regulations to strengthen the financial system. In the U.S., the Dodd-Frank Act of 2010 introduced stricter capital requirements for banks, increased oversight of financial institutions, and created the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to protect consumers. The crisis highlighted the interconnectedness of the global economy and the need for international cooperation. It underscored the need for a balanced approach to economic growth, emphasizing sustainable investment and job creation. Lessons from the 2008 crisis continue to shape economic policy and financial regulation today. Section 1. Economic Crises, the Market's Cleansing Fire. Each crisis, however devastating, serves as a correction mechanism, a cleansing fire that purges excesses and exposes vulnerabilities. The market adjusts, weeding out unsustainable practices and reallocating resources for a more resilient economy. Section 2, the enduring lessons of economic upheaval. The Great Depression shook the global economy, challenging laissez-faire economics and leading to government intervention. The New Deal reshaped government's role with social safety nets and public works. The 1970s oil crisis exposed energy vulnerabilities, spurring innovation in energy efficiency and renewable technologies. Section 3, navigating the future, prudence, innovation, and a dose of humility. The Latin American debt crisis underscored the importance of fiscal prudence and sound economic management. The 2008 financial crisis highlighted the need for robust financial regulations and effective risk management. Lessons from past crises guide us in navigating the 21st century economy. Prudence, innovation, and humility are essential for sustainable growth and resilience.